economies. We look at roles of trade, impacts of migration. And one of the things that in particular that I try to do is I try to train a new generation of students to be schizophrenic. Now, psychologists would tell me that that's not a good thing to do. But I'm talking about their being intellectually schizophrenic in the sense of their being able to communicate with a variety of audiences and to be able to take the same material to give a presentation to a professional group and then take the same material but translate it in a way that is effective to the public policy decision makers. And unfortunately, too many of us in academia are only content to do the first part, and we need to have a few more people doing some of the second part. And so that's part of our responsibility. And as you can see, we have a very large international group comprising people from a variety of different countries and continents, and then now and again we have an American. And unfortunately not as many as I would like. Well, let me quickly go through to the issues. The first question that is probably asked of me more than anything else is, when will Illinois recover from the recession? To which I respond, which one? Because one thing that is not known is that while Illinois has lost over 400,000 jobs in the current recession that started in December 2007, we never recovered from the 2000-2001. Now, when I talk about recession here, I'm not using the National Bureau of Economic Research's definition based on gross product for a number of reasons. One is the estimation of gross product at the state level is not as sophisticated or as reliable as it is at the national level. And secondly, it's very, very hard to communicate to the public that if gross product changes, that they can put their arms around it and sort of understand what that is. Employment, on the other hand, is something that I think most of us understand, and I think that for many of us, it's a much more important measure of the economic health of an economy than something like gross product. So when we heard last week that the recession ended in the middle of last year, it didn't elicit the sort of, wow, that's terrific. Things are so much better with our unemployment rates over 10%. So that for us then, when I talk about the recession, I'm talking about an employment recession, meaning anything less than a prior peak. We never recovered our peak employment of November 2000. So here we are, 9+, almost 10 years from that prior peak, and we're even further down. So when we talk about recovery, we have to add 10 years onto that number, because that's how long we will be in recession. As you know, the U.S. economy recovered in February 2005, and then, of course, it went into a tailspin at the end of 2007. And what we've seen in the recent data, particularly the months July through September, is a sort of a, I think in the sort of CNBC, the business place where everybody is so excited about every piece of information, and they always use these wonderful cliches about the upside looks better than the downside, and the fundamentals of the economy are sound going forward, and Governor Quinn has a firm hand on the tiller. All right? And this is the sort of thing they would say, there's evidence of green shoots in the economy. All right? Why? Because private sector job growth in the last 3 months has been positive, but it was swamped by the release of temporary government workers associated with the census. So last month, for example, we added 67,000 jobs in the private sector, but we lost over 100,000 jobs in the government sector. More recently, in the last several months, there has been evidence the number of first-time unemployment claims has been declining. And so people are saying that may be some sign that if we're not recovering, we may at least have bottomed out. The current data has caused a lot of people to postulate that we might be in for a double dip. You know, this great love of visuals, and people are talking about a W-type recession where we go down, we come back up, and then we sink down again. And I think it's very dangerous to extrapolate on the basis of those data. The September data for Illinois are not yet available. As you can see, for the last 3 months, we've lost jobs, having had a pretty good first part of the year. We actually recovered jobs. But the number is that, one of the numbers I want you to keep in your head is that since the beginning of the recession in December 2007, our state has lost 368,000 jobs, and we have an unemployment rate which is just hovering under 10%. That's the official rate. Our feeling is that that rate significantly underestimates the number of people who are without jobs. What is not included in that rate are people who are called discouraged workers. They've looked for jobs in the past, they can't find the jobs, they drop out of the labor force. And unlike Europe, which would still count them as part of the labor force, we don't. So we've had very interesting cases where job growth has been negative and the unemployment rate has gone down. And people just don't understand this. And that's because people have stopped looking. And so the number of people in the labor force is lower, so the unemployment rate goes down. In addition, there are at least 2 million people nationally who are in part-time jobs who are looking for full-time jobs. And so when you add that to the third dimension, and that is since 2000, both the national economy and the state of Illinois economy has added population, and the labor force has expanded. When you add all of that up, the real unemployment rate is much higher. So what we estimate is a shadow unemployment rate. And so for the state of Illinois, we feel it's around 12%, and we still think that that may be conservative. It may be probably around 14%. The only good news is it's lower than the rate for the rest of the Midwest. But if you took out Michigan, the rest of the Midwest would be in better shape than Illinois. When you look at the effect of the two recessions, the 2000, 2001, and the current recession, and you add it all up, we are 463,700 jobs below our prior peak. And that's a lower bound estimate, which I will show you in a moment. It's hard to put your arms around that in a state with over 5 million people in the labor force. But one indicator that I think resonates very effectively is when we look at the cumulative effect of job losses from 2000 to 2009, and we estimate what each person who is employed would generate in terms of income tax and sales taxes to the state government. That represents a loss to Illinois revenues of $6 billion, all right, of the somewhere between $12 and $14 billion current account deficit we have right now. So to some extent, you may say I'm being somewhat unfair to our legislators because this is a cyclical problem, and really perhaps they could not have done very much about it. But I think I will counter that with some other arguments. So we've been in recession for 10 years in employment terms. Before that, since the Second World War, Illinois has never had a period longer than 8 years where we've been in an employment recession. So now we're already exceeding